February 18th, 2000. An exhibition hall full of murmuring attendees walked the floor playing newly crafted games made for the next generation in console gaming, the PlayStation 2. PlayStation Festival held many anticipated titles for the soon-to-release console, and the reveals of what games would later come in a year only further promised newer experiences for gamers around the world. Yet, amongst the demos, trailers, and announcements, one little title was teased that no one could have predicted. In a no-camera-allowed press conference, the president of Square, Tomoyuki Takechi, walked out onto the stage to announce not only a new game, but a collaboration with one of the most wealthy, successful, and oldest entertainment companies of all time, Disney. Introducing members from Disney Interactive and exchanging pleasantries, the House of Mouse executives revealed that this game, created together, would appeal to the Japanese market of gamers, ultimately promising a game that has never really been seen before. A game with the property of Disney characters, but the gameplay and flavor of a Final Fantasy title. The presentation ended as music blares and mascot Disney characters enter the stage and dance enthusiastically, while every journalist sat there in disbelief at what they just witnessed. Square, now known today as Square Enix, masters of JRPGs and owners of the beloved Final Fantasy franchise, were partnering with a company that had single-handedly created a monopoly on the animated feature business and creating modern classics in the process. No doubt, every journalist in that room, with their mouth agape, had the same two questions. How and why? 22 years later, the game we know today as Kingdom Hearts stands as a testament to that partnership. It is still one of my favorite games of all time. A story that, while it teeters on the edge and even jumps in the pool of cringe, still emits the charm of a Disney film and a combat system that has created an almost new breed of action RPGs. But as a fan, I had the same questions. How and why? Because by all logical means, Kingdom Hearts should not exist. It shouldn't. By every creative metric we have available and cohesive business partnership on paper, not a single person could have guessed this. We, however, live in the reality where this does exist. So how can a Japanese game company use the IP from one of the most strict studios in the world and blend them with their own storytelling and game design flavor, without it feeling like an imitation of its license or a joke of a game that would never be taken seriously by the wider gaming public? Well, I want to show you that. I want to go behind the development of the game and through its release show you how they managed to balance two different tones better than most game tie-ins can even do today. I want to expel the assumptions some may have about this game and show it for what it is, and ultimately show you how a game I played in 2002 is something more than the sum of its parts. So before we talk about Kingdom Hearts itself and what makes it work, we have to go back and start where many great stories and terrible pitches take place. An elevator inside Tokyo. Of the two people in the elevator was reportedly Square's Shinji Hashimoto, who at this time had credits on 3 mainline Final Fantasy games in a producer role. Arguably, the games that truly brought Final Fantasy overseas in a major way. Needless to say, this man was on and up at the company. Square was operating out of an office building in Tokyo, and in that same building on a different floor was a subdivision of Disney. So when Shinji Hashimoto stepped into that elevator, the other person inside was someone? Just some fucking guy. No one knows who it was. It could have been anyone. It could have been just the random coffee guy from the Disney office. Actually, it couldn't even been from the Disney office. It could have been the random coffee guy. The random coffee guy pitched Kingdom Hearts. Once you realize it was the coffee guy, the possibilities are endless. It could have been Disney CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, just in disguise, just fucking around and trolling people. It could have been the reanimated corpse of Walt Disney who thought, yeah, Japan seems chill now, I'm gonna go over there. I'm finally free from cryo sleep, why not? So, for the sake of argument, I just want to show you my artistic interpretation of what I think happened inside that elevator.
余計なお世話だ。俺は別に無難に済ませてだけだよ。
白雪姫、僕ならまだこの町にいるよ。
お前がどう言おうが、俺はこの服が気に入った。これでいい。
Despite this being my headcanon of how it went, there are two very good reasons that the Big Mouse and Square were fit to make a game. Number one, when Final Fantasy VII released worldwide, it exploded in popular culture and sold unbelievably well, cultivating a new audience of Final Fantasy fans that didn't exist yet. Square, as they released consecutive Final Fantasy titles 8 and 9, became more known for their engaging gameplay, groundbreaking cinematics, and personable characters. So this resulted in a huge financial win, and when you hear the name Disney, what do you think of? Money. Now, I won't do the video essay thing where I tell you about Walt's childhood and early cinema, but a little history lesson on Disney games is important, so here's the rundown. Disney has had its hand in gaming since 1981 when they partnered with Big Brother lawsuit experts Nintendo to create a Mickey Mouse version of Game & Watch. You know, the little guy in Smash. An opportunity to make a game on one of the world's most recognizable figures is something other game devs would kill for a chance at. So through the next decades and beyond, Disney would allow developers from many different countries to license their characters and develop games that could be sold to the wide-eyed fans in any country they could. The games were usually centered on Mickey and his close friends because they were applicable. You could create any game scenario and place Mickey or Donald in it. However, some developers in other countries were able to license particular movies when they went to theaters to also promote them to the gaming market. Films like Little Mermaid, Black Cauldron, just to name a few. This business of licensing was so frequent, Disney created Disney Interactive Studios, which would publish the games themselves and have more creative control over the projects and where they could release them and on what systems. Overall, they did okay. The games they were making were not the groundbreaking titles of the time. They were never really experimental or utilized the IP in a way that wasn't already allowed. Games that were based on standalone films like The Little Mermaid couldn't deviate from the general plot points of the film. This mindset did begin to skew as games got longer, budgets got bigger, and Disney realized players want more gameplay, and you can't just shoehorn a film's plot into every platformer every time without there being major continuity issues. Some of these games you may look back fondly and appreciate if you grew up with them, and even think they had great gameplay and music, like DuckTales. Which brings me to the second reason Disney said yes to Square. Of all the games I've shown you, what do the majority of them all have in common as a genre? Platforming. Platforming is an easy to replicate game design formula, but not an easy one to make fun or distinguish amongst the crowd. Games like DuckTales, Aladdin, and The Lion King were the highlights of this era of Disney games because they felt unique to their brothers and sisters. Also, I learned this happens when you get a game over in The Lion King, and I have to show you because I don't know how this got okayed. Disney. What the fuck, man? Now, not all the Disney games were platformers with fucked up game over screens, and despite some success, the rest of them were okay cash grabs, to put it mildly. The formula quickly became use characters to mimic the style and genre of whatever games were doing successful numbers at the time. Mario Kart 64 is stealing the show, so get Huey, Dewey, and Louie on that track. Even post Kingdom Hearts this happens. Devil May Cry is popping off, so give Jack Skellington a combo meter. People like that Tony Hawk guy, so surely Goofy can pipe. Hi, this is editor Mugen talking, who has just learned that piping also means something else entirely. Despite so many of the devs in and out of house excited to put their own spin on this beloved property, there was no Disney game that successfully captured a certain genre, RPGs. I assume because it was too ambitious. RPGs are stat heavy and they require variables upon variables as well as progression that make the gameplay meaningful. They need an engaging story to balance out the repetitive turn-based combat, and many of these young devs Disney commissioned had no experience in these genres, hence why platforming was so common in the early years of their games. This also had the effect that any game Disney published stayed within their market of Disney-infused gamers, but never reached beyond until now. So Square was the perfect partner, and this was not a commission as much as it was a collaboration. Having huge international fame after their games succeeded worldwide, the big Square was still looking for new opportunities in video games that continued to push creatively into unknown territory. And being able to use the license of America's favorite mouse was a golden opportunity for them. So the talks began. Development started not long after Final Fantasy VIII. Resources were shared and then revealed to the public in 2001 at E3 was Kingdom Hearts. This was the first time many in the world were starting to hear about the game, and let's say the confusion of the first round of journalists started to become the common reaction. While the concept in the trailer remained unproven, there was something there, and it wasn't entirely Disney or Final Fantasy, but something completely new. No one could just explain it yet. As more trailers came out and the game entered its final stages of development, the game was released in Japan on March 28th, 2002, and by November that same year, the entire world had it, including a 6-year-old boy in Australia who just received his very own PS2 and a single game with it. Seeing characters from the movies he loved, and on the back characters from that one game he watched his older brother play a lot of, he knew this was something that he had never really seen before. But at the same time, it was exactly what he had been waiting for. So I plugged in the console, I turned on my CRT that sat on my dresser, and I pushed that little green button. And after looking at a black screen as it loaded, I heard waves. One thing I've grown to miss and appreciate, especially of games from the PS2 era, is unique or compelling title screens. If it does a job of setting an atmosphere even without any music playing, I know the shit has 9 out of 10 odds to go pretty hard. One of the things that Kingdom Hearts does so well when setting its tone is by not showing both IP in your face. There are no Disney or Final Fantasy characters on the title screen, and that's important because this game isn't really about them. It's not Mouse or Big Sword, it's Kingdom Hearts. The boy at the front is totally new, our protagonist Sora, one of 4 original characters made for this game. Having him there says to the player this is his story, and it's about to be really, really weird, but also pretty amazing. Let's sum up. Kingdom Hearts is an action-adventure JRPG following the story of Sora, Donald Duck, and Goofy as they fight against the forces of darkness, searching for lost friends and meeting beloved Disney and Final Fantasy characters with a combat system so good it made the Final Fantasy VII remakes possible. Sweet, simple, and clean. So now we know why Kingdom Hearts came to be, but now I want to show you how it was able to become a game unlike most JRPGs at the time, all with a little menu and an icon. When it comes to RPGs, they are typically divided into 2 core elements, the gameplay and the narrative. Kingdom Hearts was no exception, and for me to sell you on this, it's best to start with the gameplay, particularly the fights. And damn, did Square make it fun to fight. RPGs up until this point were usually turn-based or real-time action. Real-time action involves either isometric or first-person attacking and dodging, or selecting enemies to be auto-attacked. Turn-based lets the player have a moment to choose what action to take next in battle, and sometimes there is a time limit on when you can make that decision. The clarification for this is important because Kingdom Hearts offers a unique blend of the two. As you journey through the worlds, Sora's action commands are displayed on the bottom left, just like in Final Fantasy battles. Having whatever command is selected and pressing X will have Sora take that action. Attack, magic, items, or summon. Having you navigate through commands in the heat of combat provides an extra layer of tension, especially when needing to use an item to replenish magic or health. Basically, try not to fumble what you choose as Cerberus jumps at you.
Oh god, you picked me up!
Game director and big shoe lover Tetsuya Nomura wanted hybrid action RPG combat that could emulate what Final Fantasy battles may feel like when they're not beholden to technological limitations or series trademarks. Instead of 3 or 4 people standing in place waiting to hit each other, it's an all-out intense battle with enemies moving everywhere, something that utilized the PS2's hardware to the maximum. It's hectic, but at the same time, it feels extremely fluid, and it's easy to understand because of how the combat is presented to you visually. And you know this immediately as soon as you hit an enemy. By mashing attack, Sora can perform a combo as long as he hits an enemy, allowing 3 hits in a low level combo and numerous more as you level up. Compared to other action-oriented RPGs at the time, this felt new because it wasn't just the same action animation repeated every time you mashed the attack button, but Kingdom Hearts wanted something that felt satisfying the moment you hit an enemy and finished a combo. It's that same feeling you get when you land consecutive hits in a fighting game like Smash or getting hit markers in an FPS. The indication you are sick as fuck, getting XP, leveling up, all the things a little gamer should. Kingdom Hearts always has these effects when attacking, coupled with the visual and audio cues that end with what I like to call the dopamine kill. It differs from game to game. In an RPG, it's that visual and audio jingle when you level up or defeat the boss. In a game like League, it is the visual smackdown of an elimination paired with that lovely voice announcing, "You have slain an enemy." And for Kingdom Hearts, it's whenever you defeat a Heartless, the main enemies of the game. You receive your quick and successive dopamine kill straight to the brain with an XP number and a visual audio heart disappearing into the air. It's this basic combat loop that slowly builds in complexity just from the single action of attacking. And the combat system was of course influenced by Final Fantasy, but the icon I mentioned before was inspired by a different game, by one of the biggest N64 titles of all time. Okay, Ocarina of Time is good, greatest game of all time, yada yada, change the industry, blah blah blah. I'm not going to regurgitate its gaming impact, but what I am going to mention is what Ocarina brought into the spotlight. Z targeting. Locking onto an enemy and switching between multiple dividing attention and combating them all at once was hugely innovative, as it felt more in line with what real sword fighting was kind of like. Big Shu Nomura felt this was something he could bring to his game in a major way. Real-time action RPGs had you either click on an enemy or be near enough to hit them while facing that direction, and some of the games tried using Z targeting for their combat as well, but they only imitated and never made any adjustments or supposed improvements that distinguished their combat from what they were inspired by. But that's not what Kingdom Hearts did. When Sora is near an enemy, a small yellow cursor appears, and attacking that enemy causes Sora and the camera to direct their attention toward it, until the player runs in a different direction, faces a new enemy, or the enemy is killed. This is Nomura's interpretation of Z targeting, and in my humblest of opinions, is smooth as silk. Having the player's organic direction and actions be the dictator for where the reticle lands feels as intuitive as being in a real battle surrounded by multiple enemies. You attack who you can, when you can, and if you need to get some distance away from the danger, you don't need to unlock or strafe away since Sora's movements don't change whether he is targeting or not, retaining that speed of the combat. And if you want to stay locked on like a Zelda game, a simple R1 press and you will never see that enemy escape. And it all happens seamlessly. While other RPGs were still using the idea of random encounters and transitioning to a battle mode environment, Kingdom Hearts just did random encounters in the open world by having enemies appear in specific locations that the player must traverse through. They feel random, but that also aligns with the lore of the enemies. And if you want to run, you just run. I know I'm talking a lot about a lot of technical stuff, but this is part of what makes everything in the background feel so smooth. Sora's movements are also a technical achievement for what the PS2 could do with attack animations, and they are contingent on enemy placement. It's not a commonly talked about game design implementation, but here I'll explain the basics. This enemy is slightly in the air. The player can choose to use the jump button and then attack the enemy, initiating a combo. But when the cursor is shown, it also telegraphs to the player that this target is within reach of a close quarter attack. So if I were to just press only attack, Sora would use the appropriate animation to hit the target. so you don't realize it when playing, but Sora is using animations that best fit the attack scenario you are in, even with added abilities that close the gaps between you and enemies. Like many creative technical outlets, sometimes the best use of mechanics and techniques are applied when you don't notice them. This is what makes the combat so frantic, fast, fluid, but most importantly, just fun. Perfect for when you were 6 and just mashing X like me. On mashing X, something that I think boggles my mind when I hear criticism of this game, besides the very normal, non-convoluted, cringe-free story, is that the gameplay is extremely repetitive for what is ultimately a mash attack button to win game, which is a fair criticism at its surface. But Kingdom Hearts actually rewards players for diverse gameplay by being repetitive. To explain that, I want you to think of a game that is repetitive and boil that game to a core routine. Right now, are you thinking of Mario? Continuously jumping all the time? Maybe Tetris with just the constant shifting of blocks? Maybe Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy where you just grind out battles for experience? Any Fortnite gamers? Dark Souls is so deep, bro, for real, changed my life. Whether it's a game you despise or your favorite game of all time, nearly all games repeat the same set of actions and conditions to achieve a gameplay loop. It's a design term to ensure replayability and progression. Nearly every single game you play has a gameplay loop. The gameplay loop of Mario is clearing stages, and the main action to achieve this is jumping. But what keeps it from being repetitively boring are variables. The enemies, the height of the jumps, the complexity and different theming of the levels divorces the constant repeating actions. Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, it's the battle system of each one and how it varies. The enemies faced, their different weaknesses or attack patterns, and the story accompanying it. Great games use variables to make repetitive gameplay fun. Kingdom Hearts has its own variety in some visual ways, but for combat, it is the enemies and how you fight them. And you are incentivized to fight certain enemies with tech points. Nearly every enemy in the game have physical attacks that can be guarded or deflected, and each time that happens, you gain experience points. Some of which not only give you more experience points, but they also let you stun or get in a free hit or two for risking damage to send back a projectile, guard an attack, or exploit a specific weakness. Some enemies in the game have elemental affinities to them, fire, thunder, etc. And if you were to use blizzard magic on a fire enemy, its death grants extra XP every single time. This offers a perfect risk of damage to receive more of a reward in battle, but does punish you for not staying on top of the work. These exploits also force you to think strategically about using magic and other abilities against certain enemies or bosses after a failed attempt. Like when fighting Maleficent for the first time, who fights from the top of what I can only describe as a magic concrete Beyblade. Depleting its health bar then allows you to finally reach her to deal some damage. Rinse repeat kind of boss thing. But if you pay attention through the game on how the spell Gravity is used, you can cast it on the concrete Beyblade and immediately force it to the ground and leave her open for that wombo combo. No questions asked. So many enemies, bosses, and secret bosses all have their quirks to them, which makes you realize I could mash X like a 6-year-old ape like I did, or I could genuinely try something new. When recording footage, I found myself using magic a lot more than I had ever done before. Using magic that enabled me to stun enemies more than chase them around, but also deal damage to enemies who can move way faster. Even when I was fighting bosses, I started to see the many alternatives of combat versus all I thought you could do as a kid, which was just mash X. The magic bar and tech points in hindsight are kind of revolutionary. The ideas centered around taking risks and making attacks to slowly build back magic points instead of running out completely until rest is taken or items are used. The battles always say to the player, here is your situation and how do you want to adjust to it. The only true enemy that has not gotten better with age is the camera. And that is partially because it hadn't been utilized like this in a game at that time. One of the reasons action RPGs were primarily isometric or had a single camera angle is as follows. One is because it was easy to code dynamic and interesting environments when your computer at the time had fewer megabytes than a Tamagotchi. But also when action was present on the screen, it was never a question of where an enemy was or who was attacking who. This is something early dynamic cameras in three-dimensional video games struggled with, and some were smooth and others not so much. It's one of the reasons why hack and slash games have wide angles or remain fixed on a specific angle in tight rooms. Kingdom Hearts doesn't follow that mindset because it's not just a hack and slash game, Besides Ocarina of Time, Nomura was very open about another N64 game that inspired this design mindset.
Hello!
Big Shoes really said, I'm going to steal from both The Godfather and Indiana Jones and it'll just work out. Mario 64 not having a dedicated analog stick for camera controls and instead mapping to buttons never made the gameplay it offered not fun. Besides fighting enemies across the many Disney worlds, exploring and uncovering new nooks and crannies in them yields new items and rewards for the player. Platforming is also a small aspect of moving through all the worlds and having them all loosely connected. In this game's Tutorial Island, which is literally an island itself and the closest thing to New Zealand, the game lets you fight and explore more of the basic controls the intro has already taught you. Climb trees, find chests, and understand what the game is asking of you through its story. While you're not going to be finding power stars in any paintings, the game is going to be giving you information, especially if you go and look for it through characters, kind of like a Final Fantasy game. The first time I played this game, it took me days to get off the Destiny Islands because I would auto skip through bubble speech cutscenes, which I thought weren't important because when I was 6, why would I read when all the games I had until then told me everything through cutscenes? Why do I need to look at a map or what quests when Ubisoft give me a list and have me auto run there? Why explore unless it's a checklist? No radio towers? Bad stuff square? GG, better luck next time, Sora. But only later when I put on my big boy pants did I realize that if I just read the fucking screen, the game was telling me what I had to collect and where secrets may lie if I have the means to unlock them. Like in many action platformers at the time, Kingdom Hearts wants the player to backtrack to locations they have been to before and unlock new areas or find resources valuable to their progress. Think of the Magna Boots from Ratchet & Clank or the blue eco vents in Jak and Daxter. Having unlocked an ability, you gain an understanding of what you had to do initially. Some of this is mandatory to progress the story. An example is when you return to the hub world Traverse Town, you have to find a guy called Leon, who's Squall, Final Fantasy character, cool gunblade. He's in the sewer caverns, but to get here, you must use the Red Trinity. A landmark ability when activated creates cutscenes of our trio unlocking a part of the map or finding something new. And it's after unlocking the ability to use red ones that the story directs you to find Leon, making you try and remember where else in all the worlds you have visited have you seen this symbol. Other abilities are more organic, like the high jump, allowing larger leaps to get to hard to reach treasure chests, or gliding, letting you reach further parts of the map you could never get to unless you know every glitch like it's a Breath of the Wild speedrun. But one of the best applications of this are in the environment. These little secrets of backtracking are sprinkled throughout the game, and they're not all mandatory, but you would be missing valuable items and weapons that can help better how you want to play in combat. I would admit that it's probably one of Kingdom Hearts' weaker parts. Not the backtracking specifically, but the act of platforming. The same reason why the worst Disney games felt terrible to play is because platforming is easy to create, but it's hard to make feel fluid and fun compared to other titans of the time. There is an amazing amount of depth in old platformers. Mario 64, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Spyro, and whatever Gex is. Kingdom Hearts doesn't have depth in its platforming. When Sora jumps, he doesn't leap with speed, and when he lands, it feels more real but not fluid, quick, or fun. It's like jumping out of glue and then onto a bit of tape until you start running again. Part of this is mended by the abilities I mentioned, but they bypass platforming altogether, in turn making platforming a chore to be avoided with later game rewards. So to me, it is the weaker part of the game, and it feels like it doesn't escalate in complexity, but more becomes a byproduct of losing complexity. That and the Star Fox ripoff Gummy Ship sections, which aren't really worth mentioning beyond that they just tie the narrative of traveling to other worlds. If you really enjoy these Gummy Ship sections, more power to you, but I would not invite you to my house. It's just a bit odd. Kingdom Hearts gameplay ultimately wants to present choices to you, and there are no more choices than in how you build your party and their abilities. Whenever you level up Sora, Donald, and Goofy, you gain access to abilities that allow different choices in battle. Standard RPG stuff. But the difference here is that abilities are not learned or chosen and set in stone. They are equipped. Ability points and how many you have available results in how many abilities you can equip. It forces you to understand what you want to give up versus what you feel you need in combat. Here's an example. Scan is an ability that lets you see the health bar of an enemy. Dodge roll is an ability that you can do in Dark Souls. Guard lets you deflect against attacks, and counterattack lets you attack only if you guard or deflect a strike from an enemy. Based on the ability points or AP you have available, you can only equip 3 of these. Which of these abilities do you want to equip? This is just 4 abilities amongst all the ones you and party members have access to that vary in how you implement them. Combo Plus is an ability that allows you to add another hit to your combo, and the more you equip, the more it stacks, but it also delays how long until you reach your finisher, which is your strongest attack. Leaf Bracer is an ability that lets a party member cast heal without it being interrupted by an enemy attack. Invaluable if you aren't the best at dodging, guarding, or just, being good. Hey! I would actually equip that though, it's a really good ability. Personally, it's endearing to play a game you haven't played in a long time, only for its inherent gameplay rhythm to come back to you as soon as you pick up the controller. I love fighting large groups of enemies, even at endgame, in the Colosseum, or the final world of the game, giving myself these random arbitrary restrictions to make the combat a little more challenging for myself, like only being able to hit an enemy after successfully guarding one of their attacks, or making sure I hit them with magic before I absolutely lay into them. Even level grinding can be fun with all its variety of worlds and enemies. The combat progression is a wave that just builds and builds into this light show of magic and enemy attacks and expressive animation. I've lost hours to fighting and battling with characters from worlds I knew through a completely different kind of screen. It's just fun in motion. You know? But we're too early in this video to get into nostalgia. So, in conclusion, gameplay solid, good stuff, someone should let that Chad make another game. Getting back to indoctrinating you into playing this game, the hard part starts now, at least for me. I've always found when recommending games to friends to focus solely on what makes the gameplay strong, and if there are story or genre aesthetics sprinkled within, it's kind of best to save that until later. So, to describe Kingdom Hearts and its narrative, the juice of its story isn't so much sprinkled in as it is chemical X dumped into the pot. And for my money, it is what made this incoherent idea not catch on fire and become another cringe video game tie-in, because they leaned all the way in. Have you ever watched a movie that is this meets this, and on the surface it may seem like these two things have nothing to do with each other at all, but as you progress, you start to understand that this story is the only one that could combine these two things together seamlessly. There is a movie that I love called Everything Everywhere All at Once, and if you were to ask me what it's about, I would say it's a beautiful story about a family. It's a story about a woman understanding how her life went and the choices she made to get to where she is, and appreciating who she is at this point in time, and out of all the possible realities, is in a universe where she has her family and she loves them regardless of the circumstances they're in. If you would ask anyone else what this movie is about, it's about a woman who is able to learn kung fu by sniffing a bee, fights a guy with a dildo up his bum, actually, no, scratch that, fights 2 guys with dildos up their bums, as well as having a grandfather from China who can't speak English, only for him to transform his electronic wheelchair into a mech.
What the fuck are you doing?
The fact that I'm able to tell you one aspect of this movie while completely disregarding the other and having them both be true is a perfect balance in presentation and tone. And that's exactly what Kingdom Hearts does. It is a story about these young kids going on an adventure and leaving home. But it is that exact same game where we're going to watch Sora, Donald, and Goofy try and learn how to swim. That is the importance of presentation and tone. It's important to showcase to the audience the kind of tone you're having, and if you want to escalate it, you must do so gradually. Albeit Kingdom Hearts does the exact same thing, just without as many dildos. I want to emphasize again how batshit insane this concept was at the time. A time where the most crazy well-known crossovers were probably Melee and Marvel vs. Capcom. This was long before Mario and Rabbids, before Spider-Man, Goku, and Rick did Orange Justice, before Shrek in Tony Hawk. Crossovers have always been in abundance besides just video games in Japan. I mean, look at my Levi laundry detergent. No, you can't have any. Get your own! But most crossovers are fighting games or party-based activity games with a very loose story attached. Yet, with Kingdom Hearts being an RPG, it had to have a very strong narrative and presentation to accompany that gameplay. Having characters known internationally be shown in the game and play a large part of the story, it was integral that they didn't just look accurate, but that they were expressed accurately. This was achieved by exchanging resources with the animators over at Disney who worked on many of the films present in the game, while the research for the developers involved watching some of Disney's most iconic pieces that have ever graced the silver screen. I'm talking Aladdin, Tarzan, Beauty and the Beast, basically the entire Disney Renaissance, the real-life equivalent of the 1992 NBA Olympic Dream Team, or the Big Three for weebs. And the results of that research are pretty damn amazing. Something you'll notice in all facets of the game is how well animated all characters are. In cutscenes where the animation and faces are detailed, Disney characters have jumped seamlessly from the 2D to the 3D with so much care. This was due in part to the homework of the Square animators, but also by studying up on the 12 principles of animation that the Big Mouths love to use. The most notable and important is the first principle: squash and stretch. The idea that an object made of some level of elasticity, like a rubber ball or even a human, when in motion squashes and stretches its shape based on the velocity of its own movement. Man, how smart and insightful and cool and hot am I that I wrote that? I definitely didn't get it from some Wikipedia article explaining the 12 principles of animation and slightly change it to fit my own delivery. And these glasses actually look pretty good on me, please let me know. And don't be mean, I'm very fragile. You'll notice it in jokes and gags of iconic Disney films and shorts. One example used in the game is this scene here of Captain Hook. Just pay attention. Utilizing the camera in the right position and stretching the models of the characters, it can replicate that feeling of hand-drawn rubber hose animation, the big G's that Disney were known for. It wasn't always possible due to the technical limitations, but it did pretty damn well. Now, this wasn't just mandatory to Disney characters specifically, as Sora being held to the same kind of animation standard was integral in that he blended well with the characters he met. Part of Sora's design changed dramatically from concept to final phase. Being the main character, he is the narrative glue between the two distinct IPs. Without him, the whole thing kind of falls apart. Starting off as a lion with a chainsaw and then eventually settling on a human boy with a combination of Nomura's own design aesthetics. Spiky hair, chains, zippers, and exaggerated accessories mixed with the Disney charm of a character whose color scheme matched that of the mouse himself. Besides design, Sora is a character who actually follows the principles of animation to a much less exaggerated degree. This was a balance needed to maintain the consistency of all the characters. Animation director Tatsuya Kondo in a PSM magazine interview discussed the challenge of animating all characters in a way that did not feel out of place with each other. Kondo attributed using distinct Disney animation storytelling techniques in cutscenes instead of gameplay, and unless a character did a specific move, the gameplay was reminiscent of action in contemporary Japanese anime, having abilities that express energy attacks and flashy swordplay. So in cutscenes, keep it Disney, and then in action, let's go all Bleach. I mentioned Sora's animation style earlier in this video in a technical sense, but in the presentation here, he moves like a Disney character when running, walking, and jumping. In battle, however, he feels like another Final Fantasy character, even facing off a few in this game. In contrast to his childhood friends, Sora is the silly, goofy one trying to be cool, and is one of the reasons for the story his companions are Donald Duck and Goofy. The other is the same reason early Disney games featured the same characters. They were applicable. But in this instance, they were treated like any character. Their personalities, powers, and traits have to be established frame one. But I think what really sets the tone for what makes this blend of Kingdom Hearts work so well is the first cutscene where Donald and Goofy meet Sora, just after fighting for the very first time. Sora is offered to go with the duo, as they were both instructed to stay with the one who wields the key. Sora accepts under the idea that he may find his friends if he goes with them, but Donald gives him an ultimatum.
But you can't come along looking like that. Understand?
Oh?
No frowning, no sad face, okay?
Yeah, you gotta look funny, like us. Whoa.
Whisper runs on happy faces.
Happy?
That's one funny face.
Okay, why not? I'll go with you guys.
Donald Duck.
Name's Goofy.
I'm Sora.
All for one, one for all.
Part of what makes this scene so great is it's the first time post-nuclear darkness destruction of Tutorial Island where we see Sora smile again, even if it's just a stupid one. It evokes the kind of constant characters that Donald and Goofy are in the game, but also as icons as we know them. They are their distinct personalities, and part of that is what made them charming. They made people laugh. It establishes the kind of atmosphere Donald and Goofy can bring to the adventure ahead and helps ground a more realistic character like Sora in these worlds we visit. Like a kid who has never been to Disneyland, you have these constant characters around you along the way. One of the ways Nomura convinced Disney execs that Sora's design can work in tandem with them was by illustrating this piece of our heroic trio, and from this design alone, created more alternatives for all three depending on the world they visit and the visual style of the film it is based on. Disney then wished for Nomura to make his own stylized versions of the dog and the duck, with all the bells and whistles of a Nomura design, zippers, jackets, and more zippers. These alternate designs as well are so amazing and work so well in each world to ground it, becoming fish-based alternatives for the Little Mermaid and Halloween costume get-ups for The Nightmare Before Christmas. This lets our heroes be more flexible, and like Donald and Goofy in many of their films, they play a role in which they can be themselves but also not be the version we know them as. A lot of these aesthetic choices are successful in concept due to the zipper lover Nomura's incredible illustrations, but also with the style of Kingdom Hearts not trying to look realistic. Something a lot of PS2 games attempted to varying degrees of success. Having Nomura's illustrations be replicated so well in cutscenes with expressive animation was impressive for PS2 games at the time. Many games in the PS2 catalog began to poke around in the facial animation department a lot more due to the increased power of the PS2, and later in the life cycle actually got pretty damn close. You'll see this a lot in early PS2 game JRPG cutscenes, where they'll use the in-game character model for one section of the cutscene, then to evoke a specific emotional moment, switch over to a different, more high-definition model. This was used mostly to conserve memory. Kingdom Hearts, with its cutscenes and its animation quality, impacted the industry when showing how lifelike animated in-game characters would be, especially for Disney games. Kingdom Hearts was the first one that represented such iconic characters in such fidelity, way more before anyone else did. This ended up inspiring the devs over at Naughty Dog. According to developer and cinematics lead Josh Scher, when they began developing Jak 2, they saw early cinematic screenshots of Kingdom Hearts and in his words said, "Oh shit." And so they decided to create completely new models of the characters to use only in cutscenes. And I'm glad they did, because those cutscenes in both those games are unbelievable. It's amazing to learn that one of my favorite games of all time ended up inspiring one of my other favorite games of all time, so thank you for that. Going back to presentation, part of being a video game tie-in and having characters from a specific IP have to look convincing is important, but depending on the context, they also have to sound convincing. While the characters of Final Fantasy were an undertaking, their designs were alternative versions of their original selves, because there was no specific lore that you had to actually adhere to. Square owned the characters, it didn't matter. And many of these characters never really had a voice, as most of them are from an era of text-based storytelling, so there was a lot of creative liberty for them. But the Disney characters, they needed, at least in English, to be pretty damn close to their film counterparts. And lucky for the English release, a lot of the original cast surprisingly came back and reprised their roles. Scott Weinger as Aladdin, Chris Sarandon as Jack Skellington, Robbie Benson as the Beast, Jodie Benson as Ariel, and Tony Goldwyn to play the King of the Jungle. Now, with some talent in this, they had to be replaced due to how old the original source material is, but for Kingdom Hearts, they did an amazing job finding new talent, like Christopher Steele for Peter Pan. This here is the original Bobby Driscoll.
Of course. That's why I like him. I tell him to the Lost Boys.
And this is Kingdom Hearts Peter Pan.
I'm the answer to your prayers. Oh boy, she's getting steamed again.
It's exactly what I expect to hear a voice from 1953 in my Japanese RPG. Rarely do characters sound unlike their film counterparts. Except the genie. I know Homer Simpson did his best, but that's what happens when you try to do Robin Williams. No one can. The voice cast of the new original characters, however, is just as important, and it's actually so fresh. A young Haley Joel Osment, who you would know from Sixth Sense and Spielberg's AI, voices our protagonist. It was such a smart move, as Osment was still pretty young like our hero, allocating the voice of the character to the actual age range, unlike a lot of Japanese dubbing. This avoids something I like to call, that I just made up now, the dub zone. Usually in English translated Japanese media, poor writing, translations, dub delivery, or direction can often make a lot of voice acting have the same intensely scripted feeling. Something that the later games, Kingdom Hearts 3, suffers from. But Game 1, Scene 1, Osmond nails it. He isn't an anime dubbed teenager, he's just a teenager who is able to have a definitive reaction to his experiences. And the very first scene is able to establish a clear goal and motivation. He exudes this Disney charm, but also growth of a Disney and Final Fantasy character.
I'd like to see it too. Along with any other worlds out there. I want to see them all.
His delivery is only matched by his new character co-stars. Hayden, I don't know how to say that name, hang on. I gotta look at Google for, sorry Hayden. Hayden Panettiere as Kairi and David Gallagher as Riku. A young cast all with dynamic ranges. And the villain is Billy Zane, with some of the most crisp and strong delivery in the entire game.
Tied to the darkness, soon to be completely eclipsed.
I realize I am spending a lot of time on presentation and not the actual narrative. And there's a good reason to that. It's because the majority of the overall story in the first game is told through the lens of the films. Go to the world, experience that world's loosely based narrative, and have it closely tied into the game's larger narrative of finding Sora's friends and defeating the threats of the next world. And so the presentation of these characters elevates what is a standard narrative into a convincing one. I've made this comparison before, but it's like One Piece, but instead of being a rubber man with an OP crew and sick islands, we have a small teenager wielding a giant key and an OP cast of films to base off. The narrative is a typical hero's journey. Sora is plucked from the life he knew and is roped into a conflict he must overcome in order to return to a new state of normalcy, having changed. That is one of the most basic structures in all of stories. And it's also an extremely tired one, if not told well or in an interesting way. Some of my favorite games are Final Fantasy games, and many of their stories follow a similar structure. So what ties them both together to trump a tired narrative? Each game and Disney film have their own themes and messages of what they want to say, yet there is a feeling they share. Some of the films of the Disney Renaissance follow characters who are misunderstood and, against increasing odds, attempt to try and become the person they believe they can become. Final Fantasy characters follow an overarching plot of evil villains trying to rule or destroy the world. Because it's fun or the world sucks, so let's globally F. And since the fourth title, the focus has been on specific character development and personal trauma of the main party members, thus culminating in these epic battles against godlike creatures. While on another huge scale of conflict entirely from Disney films, it is still on the surface a plot with an intense amount of overwhelming odds and succeeding in spite of them. The good anime shit. Friendship, believing in oneself and others with the hope for a better day. When you look at it through the lens of these core elements, there are many things a good old Disney film and JRPG franchise universally share in their stories. And that sentiment flourishes in Kingdom Hearts. And of course, it's the same. Friendship. Many of the characters our heroes meet become steadfast friends and ultimately influence the party in some aspect to their journey, both gameplay and story-wise. In the Deep Jungle, which is Tarzan's world, much of the personal narrative happens after the gang gets separated. Sora having been saved by Tarzan, he then asks where his friends are. And this happens.
Look, I got separated from my friends. Have you seen them?
Hmm?
Friends.
Friends.
Right, my friends. There's two of them. The loud one is Don.
Oh?
You know what? Never mind. I'm looking for my friends Riku and Kairi.
While Sora had only known Donald and Goofy for a short time, and having this unreserved worry for them, dismisses it after having an argument with the duck, resulting in the actual crash. Upon reuniting, there is this massive relief for one's well-being, followed by resentment after realizing how they ended up there. Only after defeating the enemy's world and hearing Tarzan's sentiment on friends do they apologize. Part of Kingdom Hearts is making new connections with the many characters along the way, and finding old ones, of course. While Sora does eventually encounter his best friends again, it is not the same as before. Riku, being the main friend and rival, that while at first happy to see Sora, is also apprehensive at the idea that he has already made new friends in his absence. There is this very obvious competition and almost unspoken tension between Sora and Riku, and the gameplay emphasizes this. When you're on the islands in the tutorial, Sora can fight 3 characters to test his skills, including the incarnation of the worst impression of the character Waka from Final Fantasy X I have ever seen.
Hey, what's happening, man?
You can fight each one if you wish, but you can also fight Riku, who is stronger than all 3. His area of battle is smaller, and he retaliates against combos in more subtle and devastating ways, even baiting you to attack him so that he can just counter, and teasing you while you do it. But if you lose or win against him, Sora counts a score and continues to do so every single time. Even on the second day of the islands, you learn Riku defeated all the other characters on the island all at once by himself. And Tidus here likes to mention how Kairi can always count on him, after which the game gives you the option to also fight all 3 of the characters at once. The game is enforcing this unspoken rivalry by directly challenging me and my assumption of how Sora feels, upon which results in only then being able to beat Riku in a new game of racing, which... There are certain things in games I love. This race is not one of them. The stakes are the winner gets to name the ship of the game and basically ask out Kairi. Whether you want Sora to be better than Riku, get the ship name, or win so he can be with Kairi, the game again enforces this character dynamic into tutorial gameplay. There is nothing that will cause you the amount of stress, emotionally, financially, physically, than this fucking race. You will have a better time trying to defeat any of the secret bosses hidden throughout the entire fucking game. No amount of descriptive passages and intense audio narration I deliver will convince you of this fact. But you will know it, sweet summer child, because you have to win this race or lose it in order to progress the game. Take a look at this incredible streamer, Frankie Lolia, who has just lost 14 fights to Riku, only to finally win this one race.
Oh my god, it's gonna be called Riku's things! Oh my god, it's gonna be called Riku's things! Let's go!
This elation is the only thing you can hope for when you do this fucking race. But there is a second time at which the game decides to place the player into that same position of feeling inferior to Riku, and it is when you arrive at Hollow Bastion. For story purists out there, skip this to timecode here, but for essay heads and laundry folders, here's what happens. Upon arriving, Sora meets Riku again, who has since made his stance to side with the Heartless and only listen to Linkin Park Sasuke AMVs on repeat. He's gone dark side. Every time you see Riku, you recall that unspoken tension from the islands. Every time he won against you, every time you heard about his strength, and every time you fucking lost to him in that stupid fucking race. As the story unfolds and he becomes more of the antagonist, believing that he's doing the right thing, you are meeting people and saving their worlds. You ultimately feel for once Riku is maybe no longer the smart one, because he doesn't understand what's at stake. But that changes when Riku takes the source of all your power, the Keyblade. The Keyblade is given to Sora as his primary weapon, and it functions as an entity that chooses its master. Only Sora can wield it because it chose him. Riku, expressing his new strength and belief in what he is doing, takes it back, as it was technically meant for him originally. Like Riku puts it,
You were just the delivery boy.
because of this, Goofy and Donald join Riku, as that is their mission. With nothing but a fellow castaway and an old wooden sword from his home, the player must make it into the castle without most of their inherent strength, relying on only magic and the companion beast. All the strength you have accumulated throughout the game is lost. And again, Riku reminds you, just like on those little islands, how small and inferior you are. All those times he won in a one-on-one bout, all those times he beat you in that godforsaken stupid race, this is the worst, because now you have no one. You have no strength. But Sora and the player decides to venture forth anyway. Part of this story is a boy overcoming adversity and believing in himself as well as his friends. One of the most important lines in the game is, "My friends are my power." And it's a scene that takes place just as Sora realizes that he doesn't need an all-powerful weapon in order to fight, as long as he's surrounded by the people he cares about. Despite his lack of knowledge and understanding of the greater world, he has met such incredible people, and through them has gained an understanding more about who he actually is. But it's also the story of friends moving on and away somewhere else, even though they may not meet again. In the third act of the game, we learn that there is actually a situation in which if the great evil of darkness is defeated, all the worlds will become disconnected again, as they previously weren't. Meaning that these characters will never be able to meet each other again if they succeed and save everyone. It's a sad sentiment not being able to see your friends again and worry that they have changed, or maybe you've changed and things aren't going to be the same as they used to be. But that doesn't mean that these connections are gone. The story of Kingdom Hearts does redeem on large-scale overwhelming odds as the enemies in the game begin to increase in difficulty, and the music of those fights narratively go from this to this. That's Yoko Shimomura, and she's the woman responsible for these bangers. The main theme of Kingdom Hearts, the battle theme, all the music, and that especially means the music of each individual world. And she did all of it with a literal human inside of her. But seriously, her music is what gives Kingdom Hearts its atmosphere. If you're a Disney fanatic, you could probably tell what movie a world is based off just by the track that plays. The escalation of Shimomura's musical prowess as the story progresses is matched by the enemies we face. You'll be on the streets of Agrabah, and you'll say to yourself, yeah, I hear the violin, cello, string bass, cymbals, tambourine, shaker, bongos, guitar, and electric bass. But then you get to Hollow Bastion. Strings, piano compositions that compound with a soft choir. And then the end of the world, the final level, replaying the same exact song, albeit modified from the very beginning of the game, to help the player remember back to the beginning of their journey and all they have been through, even as throughout this final level, you cycle through all the worlds you've been through. Oh, so good. My point is, in these last two worlds, the enemies, like the music, escalate in complexity and strength, as does the narrative, changing from what were small cartoonish and Disney-esque shadows to wyverns, sorcerers, enemies with dog-faced shields, and these angelic demon shadow proportions. This same visual identity is paired with the music's in kind. The game just escalates and ultimately is greater than the sum of its parts, and that music resonates with so much of what the game is trying to say. I can cringe at some of the game and story choices in Kingdom Hearts, but if you don't feel a tug at any of your heartstrings from the musical thematic bangers that accompany them, brother, you gotta head to the closest hospital because you are dead. Kingdom Hearts is at its best as friends face against the greatest threats together, much like a great Final Fantasy game and that same feeling you had maybe playing as heroes as a kid, and much like many heartwarming adventures seen in some of these amazing animated bangers. Part of what Tetsuya Nomura mentions as the series has reached new heights and fame is the theme of connections. the connections we make, and how much they stay despite the distance between us. And that's one of the things that I think about when I think about Kingdom Hearts. Even though things have changed, it doesn't always feel like they have. The whole story, while beholden to the gameplay tie-ins with movies and world hopping, these worlds, as they are represented on the world map, are connected by a path, a road that one must follow. And there is this feeling that after you roll credits and understand all these worlds will now be separated once again from each other, and our hero is unsure of where they are, we will probably see them again, even if there won't be a sequel. Spoiler alert, there will be sequels. It's hard to talk about the narrative of this game, for me personally. Not because it is complicated like the wider gaming culture has it made out to be, at least not this one, but because the narrative is honest and open. It doesn't want to complicate, it doesn't want you to unravel, change, or obstruct a clear narrative, and there is strength in that. But because it is straightforward, nuance is limited, and from that there is no secret hidden ingredient like in Kung Fu Panda. So like I said, this is the hardest part for me to explain. And I think that's in part because when I played this years ago, I still thought cartoons lived in some other reality inside the box. This was a new adventure to me, and like much of the media I enjoyed, it did not need to have much else to it than promising adventure and fun on par to the games I played. A young boy being given the chance to go out beyond the world he lived, and for me, that was what video games were. A window into a reality more exciting and interesting than my own. It may sound biased of me to say, but I don't feel nostalgia when I replay this game, and I think that's a good thing, because it means that the game actually hasn't changed, even with its remasters and re-releases, but that I have. I'm not that kid anymore. Thank God. I'm just as likely to still smile, cry, and pump my fist in the air as I would to any of my favorite childhood video games. But I think my relationship with a lot of childhood art has changed. I like to think that I would still enjoy Kingdom Hearts today, even if it wasn't shown to me in my formative years, whether it would be a favorite or not. Tetsuya Nomura is someone I admire for doing this. I doubt anyone wanted to be the one who charted that jungle of uncertainty video game tie-ins often encompass. And I think Nomura, at the time, is the only person who could have done it. I haven't talked much about Nomura himself and his other work as of yet, even though he is the entire driving creative force behind this series. Nomura was originally hired as a debugger on Final Fantasy IV, and then became a monster and battle graphics designer for 5. Since then, he slowly grew in prominence, and was even able to work alongside the legendary Final Fantasy artist himself, Yoshitaka Amano. The man whose work spurred him creatively to draw is now working alongside him. Nomura's biggest break came after designing the characters of Final Fantasy VII, even being involved in the story conception with series creator and veteran Hironobu Sakaguchi, since he has done designs for many niche and popular titles like The Bouncer, Parasite Eve, The World Ends With You, and of course more Final Fantasy games. His ability to express characters in subtle, vague pieces, but also eye-catching apparel and accessories with a range of emotions, illustrates that he is most definitely one of the only people who could have pulled off what Kingdom Hearts was trying to do. Being introduced to video games at a very young age and becoming obsessed with the original Dragon Quest, much like the entire nation of Japan, how he described his childhood days is something I really relate to. Running around, playing and building makeshift forts while going on these mini adventures. It made me understand the kind of imagination that inhabits this man's mind. And it's bewildering to me how what I'm doing now and expressing what Kingdom Hearts did for me, and how it showed me what other games could do besides just jumping, is exactly what Dragon Quest did for him all those years ago. Dragon Quest was the first game that said to Nomura what a small little story could do for the context of a game. Long before Kingdom Hearts was even a reality, Nomura expressed his desire to create a legendary and revolutionary game like Super Mario 64. Some colleagues at Square only attributed that game's success to being a part of the Mario brand, and to make a game like that you would need characters as big as Disney. So, as fate would have it, when old Shinji Hashimoto walked into the room and presented an opportunity that he got in an elevator to utilize the very same characters that would help expose a new kind of game to the masses, Nomura put up his hand to be the head of that project. He would spend a single year after Final Fantasy VIII going back and forth with Disney executives to establish what kind of game they would make. He talks about how he wasn't entirely interested in what Disney had to give him, and he never really understood what their reactions were to whatever he showed them. It's kind of admirable, actually, as he talked about how he felt there was nothing really off the table unless he got a definitive no. He could always workshop it into something else. Initially, Kingdom Hearts was going to end when Maleficent was defeated. Over and done, good defeats evil, Disney ending, and while there is nothing inherently wrong with that in something like a Disney film, it's not entirely Final Fantasy. To keep that balance, Nomura was encouraged to sprinkle in what made Final Fantasy games compelling for that audience who are looking for the game's heritage. Thus, the more subtle tones and elements found in the beginning, the relationship between our original characters and the end, have a very distinct feeling to them. When words failed him, he would try and convey what he wanted this game to be through illustrations. He would draw characters in scenarios and imply to the dev team what combat should feel like and the emotion the characters can convey. There is a universe where this game failed, and one where it doesn't even exist. Despite what I feel personally today about Nomura's plans for stories in games, I would rather him continue making games and trying to mash a bunch of different things that should not work together, that have no business in doing so, but trying anyway. By December of 2002, Kingdom Hearts sold over 3 million copies worldwide and established itself as a successful collaborative video game. It now sits as the 10th best-selling PS2 game of all time. But I do chuckle now when I look back at the negative audience reactions to Kingdom Hearts. I recall reading some comments from you, the audience, when I asked your assumptions about Kingdom Hearts. And it made me feel like I have to explain what this is, as like many games or films I love are so easily forgotten due to some preconceived assumption brought on by presentation and words of mouth and the memes. During its development, Square's other ventures into film, like Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, was such a colossal loss for the company that, due to the success of both Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts, it actually further cemented Square's ability to provide quality RPGs and allow them to acquire the merger with Enix, becoming Square Enix today, and further producing bangers like Kingdom Hearts 2. Oh my god, it's so fucking good. Kingdom Hearts was the culmination of all the things I loved as a kid. It was all just made into this very small, specific, weird mash of characters, gameplay, elements, and themes I always wanted. It was like the game was made just for me, and I imagine so many people probably feel the same. It gave me this adventure, the thing the real world obviously couldn't give me, and I needed that as a kid. When I sit down and play Kingdom Hearts today, I'm not disappointed that I'm not immediately transported mentally back to those days of sitting on a carpet staring at an old CRT on a dresser. I can't do that, my back would kill me, but you know what I mean. Things were simpler, easier, I didn't have taxes and games were always fun and definitely had less scummy business practices. But again, I'm misremembering all the bad stuff. This isn't a secret video essay to say that games were better back then, and that there's no originality or creative risk today like Kingdom Hearts, which is not true. I guess I'm just happy I can make this video and not be depressed I wasn't transported back to being a kid with no worry in the world, because Kingdom Hearts can't do that. It can't take me back and make all the worries of today just melt away. Because eventually, for lack of a better metaphor, you gotta leave the islands. You gotta play new games, find new experiences. And replaying old games can be nice because it can remind you of what it was like, with maybe a whole new feeling and new information and new context added to it. Majority of the things I talk about in this video I learnt because I had to research the game again, play it again as an adult and understand what it's actually doing. Kingdom Hearts is cemented in time as an experience of what my childhood self loved, and obviously, that's one of the reasons for this video. It's for the kid who ran around with a cardboard keyblade he made himself, which I don't have any photos of, but I'm very proud of it. And of course, you watching, if you were that kid, you still are now, or you want to know why people think this game is really good, but you can't get past all the Disney stuff or the very basic JRPG stuff. Well, this is why. Like the connections of characters in this game, they may change and they may go away, but I won't forget it. And in times like these, end up returning for a little bit because I can't forget the joy this game gave me. Today, Kingdom Hearts is not my favorite game of all time, nor do I think about it every day. But I made this video because, like an old VHS your parents showed you, or an album you got for Christmas that really got you into that one genre of music, I have to thank Kingdom Hearts for introducing me to the possibilities and future wonder of all these other games. Like I said at the beginning, Kingdom Hearts should not exist. It just shouldn't. Thousands of people thought it would fail. It was risky and creatively, for Disney, just a cash grab. In practice, there is no reason for it to have lasted this long as a series and be this good and have such a passionate fan base and have grown men like me make video essays about them. But because of creatively weird people, ambitious animators, a mouse, a few cool video games, an elevator, and someone who wanted to make something just as impactful as the art and games he played as a child, it does. Nomura saw a reality where Kingdom Hearts existed. And I'll always be happy it's the one I'm in. Thanks so much for watching and making it to the end of the video. For people who've subscribed for a while, sorry for not uploading for 90 days, but I think when you're making a video on your favorite childhood video game, you kind of need 90 days, especially to get your shit together. So I appreciate you just waiting. For anyone new watching, I appreciate you for watching all the way as well, and feel free to subscribe and like the video. Just lets YouTube know that you like the stuff, and hopefully they'll recommend more of my videos to you and you can see what else I make. And if you're not hurting for some money or you just really like the content, I have a Patreon in the description below, which has a single tier of a single Australian dollar, which is, for the rest of the world, like 10 cents, I think. I don't know, maths isn't my best thing. On there, I have a resolution to upload there a lot more frequently, my thoughts and audio logs of what I'm watching, what I'm reading. Right now I'm reading One Piece. If you want to see what I think of Zoo, there's a lot of furries, which, you know, for me is like the best thing ever. Or you can hop into a Discord in the description below where it's full of a bunch of other people who have varying interests on art, music, memes, all the good shit. On that, I have to do my service and thank every single person who is a part of the Patreon for sticking around. So without further ado, thank you to Lenoriel, Andrew Goss, Big Nerd, Robin, Mr. Lamb, Corey, Jay the Rebel, MF Soups, Valeria Guerrero Ferreira, Deus Vault, Kyle Anderson, Marlon Allen, Jeffrey M. Slavins, William Maguire, Shingoku Satsu, Mark Tuovinen, JK Sensei, Carter Elliott, and Matthias. Thank you guys for being patrons. And I also want to make a big shout out to two creators who actually helped make this video. Number one is Moondoggy, who is an artist I love. His stuff is great, go watch it. He made the thumbnail for this video, which was awesome because I said I want Evangelion thing and he's like, what do you mean? And you know, he put up with me trying to explain what I was trying to do, so go give him some love. The second person is King Shadow, who made this 3D Blender effect thing that I used in parts of this video. So go look at his channel. He's got some manga stuff. Hopefully you like it. Thank you again for watching to the end. I really do appreciate it. That's all from me. My name's Mugen, and as always, have a good one.